So, what messaging platform do you use?
Well, it used to be just WhatsApp. Um, and then, obviously you've got your SMSs that come from the banks and stuff. But ever since the WhatsApp debacle a couple of months ago,
What did you use
and
before WhatsApp?
also before WhatsApp, it was SMS. Oh, I mean, there was Mixit for a bit of time, but that was more just like logged in and you were available to chat at that time. But since I've been in the States, a lot of people over here use iMessage, which I haven't really used before, but I actually kind of like.
Okay.
What
Did
about
you
you?
did you ever have a BlackBerry?
I never had a BlackBerry. No, I was never a BlackBerry person. I was very jealous of everyone's free BBMs back before free text messaging became available to everyone else. So I was very tempted to get a BlackBerry back in the day.
Yeah. So I think I was probably in high school when I first uh, got my first BlackBerry or my only BlackBerry, and it was pretty much for that one aspect of being able to chat to people at a very sort of low fee and almost like free. So
So it wasn't for the QWERTY keyboard, huh?
well, I mean, that was also like a plus, right? I wasn't very swift in the double tapping, but then again, like I think cell phones only like recently came, like they'd only recently come out. I think before that I had like this really basic little Samsung phone or maybe even a Motorola. So I went from that pretty much into maybe like a small feature phone and then into BlackBerry. Um, and that's kind of when you know my chat journey started. And
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever really gone back to SMS.
I actually think I prefer the days when Mixit was a thing. For those who are not South African listening to this, Mixit was a application that was running on Symbian phones and Java phones back in the day, and you actually had to open the app and then log in, and then you could chat to other people while you were online. And the first couple of iterations of Mixit is they wouldn't even hold messages for you when you were offline for when you logged back in. You just had to be online for people to chat to you, and that's where the whole like DC disconnected or BRB made a lot more sense because people couldn't leave messages for you in your inbox. You just had to be online to receive them. Um, and I kind of like that because it also allowed me to turn it off. Nowadays, telling people about that or telling people that we spent what 45 cents per message for SMSs back in the day, it sounds absolutely ridiculous because I'll shoot off like five messages one after the other to the same person without a thought that these are individual message packets that had to be paid for.
Exactly, and I think the thing is like maybe it's not so much in the US and the UK and most of the developed countries, but for some reason like in South Africa, messaging is still expensive. Like I think still these days you get like with your typical like say 100 rand a month kind of package, you only get like 30 free SMSs in that package, which
Right?
is
That's like how to you need 30 messages to organize breakfast with your friends.
it's exactly it's like it's something that's so crazy, and it's actually something that I was thinking about as like I think the other day. It's like those are the kind of things when people ask like, oh, there's like what problem would you fix in the world? Um, like when you say there's no problems out there, the fact that you have to be limited to like 30 SMSs a month, and even on the data front, um, is quite crazy. Because I know, like in the UK, I got a pretty much, I think it's like £19 a month, and with that, you get sort of unlimited calls and messaging, which is like
Yeah,
it's insane.
yeah. I was chatting to my sister and one of my friends about uh, just connectivity in general, and my hypothesis is that the entire world is going kind of like what we had with ADSL or even dial-up, but more ADSL, is that you stopped paying for the actual data usage that you're doing, and you just purchased a line connection, or you just purchase a specific speed connection to the internet. And I sort of see it going the same way with mobile networks, is that it doesn't actually make sense to say, oh, you've only got 3 gigs that you can spend over here. It's more like, oh, you have access to this connection to the internet. Do with it as you please. Um, but SMS is interesting because it actually runs on the GSM cellular network, which is why it's used by cell phones and stuff, and it doesn't run uh, via via the internet. Um, I'd say that if cell phone providers in South Africa didn't have ridiculous limitations on SMS, I would use SMS a lot more because I much prefer the concept of an open protocol such as SMS to a proprietary network like WhatsApp or like Telegram. Um, I I like the concept of Signal because Signal is open source and privacy centric, but I think that their application isn't necessarily up to scratch. And I've also had issues with with Telegram. WhatsApp is great, but I I distrust Facebook.
Yeah. But then again, like on the cell networks, can we really say that it's encrypted? Uh,
No,
so I
no,
guess
you
there
can't.
is that aspect. You got to really watch your P's and Q's when you're using SMS. And I think that data, that I mean, that cost aspect, being in South Africa, that's probably what spawned Mixit, is just the fact
Mm,
that it was like incredibly expensive to send messages via this like the cellular network. But then you've got things like IRC, you've got AIM Messenger, MSN had its own messenger, all of that you could like message for free. And even back then, you could do things like send little gifs and little pictures and do little drawings and stuff like that. Do you think it was
well,
before its time?
yeah, let me propose a question to you that I think will lead to a pretty good discussion around this. Is if you could fix anything about messaging systems as they currently stand, what would you fix? Like you have tech wizards powers, and you can go and you can make some changes. What is it that you would do?
Oof. Um, that's a good question. I guess the first thing that comes to mind is just um, like not having so much. I guess chat. I mean, there's a good and a bad side to that, right? The chat has become almost like the new email. Like I know within my company, we've started using Slack, and like you kind of you want to kind of read everything, but you really don't need to. Like so, sometimes I will just like ignore hundreds of chat messages, and I'm only really interested in what I need to know. So there is an element of like filtering that I would prefer to have, uh, making it not as annoying. Like I switch off all my notifications so that I can actually focus. And I think that focusing aspect is also quite important. You know, especially when we're doing like technical jobs, it's important to have like long periods of uninterrupted work. Um, but then the other aspect, which I've noticed, is that these chat platforms have actually become like a body of knowledge. Because if you can imagine, especially with COVID, uh, everyone who's ever had a discussion is probably going to do it virtually. And if they're all doing it through this one platform, you basically assimilate all of like knowledge within your system, right? So what's good about these things is being able to search back through public messages and see maybe there's a question you have, you want to find certain things. Obviously, there's a downside that like if you get subpoenaed, there's all this information in one place. Um, so I think there's a good side to it. What I would change, probably the notifications. Um, I guess, yeah, I think I know what your stance is, and it's probably around openness, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, you and I talk a lot about decentralization and sort of open protocols, and it's one of the things that I think is missing in the modern internet is we we invented the sort of email protocols fairly early on, and they made perfect sense. Um, it's a specific protocol that you just make sure that your client and your emailer can work with, and it is interoperable. Because I have a Gmail account doesn't mean that I can't message you with a Proton Mail account, right? That that concept is silly. Um, and I love that there is a standard between which people can communicate universally. Whereas right now, if I want to chat to you in South Africa, I have to have Telegram or WhatsApp on my phone. I can't iMessage you because you don't have an iPhone. At least I don't think you have an iPhone.
I do not.
uh, so another example of this is like RSS, right? RSS is such a fantastic way to for the internet to organize itself and to allow users to use their own clients to interact with content, right? I was thinking the other day, I was looking at restaurants around the area to try and find um, food that I eat a predominantly like plant-based diet, so I spend a lot of time flipping through restaurants to see if they have like vegan or vegetarian options before I go to them. And it has made me aware of just how awful all that information is. Like your best bet is to like open up the Yelp page and someone's taken a picture of the menu that hopefully is less than a few months old. Um, I would love to see like an open standard for menus that operates kind of like RSS feeds, that you just go to the site and you like pop the URL into your menu RSS reader, and it will just populate it into your reader of choice, and it even has like how to order that information on there. So if you want to develop an open protocol with me, we'll talk after this.
Yeah.
um,
I mean, I had
but
a similar idea with houses. So I think
yeah.
you were in that
Oh
conversation.
yeah, I
So
remember us talking
have
about that.
like you've
Yeah.
got all these sort of real estate agents, and I like my stance on buying houses is like probably not. Um, but like I think the thing is, it's such a weird market that something like an open house standard or protocol would just like disrupt it so much that it would just bring me joy, I think. So
Yeah.
like being able to, instead of having like property 24 or 102 like real estate agents kind of monopolizing that
Mm.
market, you could have it shared a little bit more freely. um,
So that actually brings me to a very good point about why we don't have an open communication standard for, or why it's not dominant, right? Is I would love to be able to download a text message client, right? So instead of having to use WhatsApp to speak to WhatsApp users and Telegram to speak to Telegram users, I would love to have just a client that I could send a message to your identifier, right? Your address, and you can pick it up on whatever client and whatever service that you use. And this would, and obviously, the protocol would need to be secure and encrypted. But the reason that this isn't the case, and the reason why these kinds of protocol developments have been like slow over time. I mean, email and RSS were like old school tech, right? Um, and the reason I don't see this happening right now is because there's no incentive to there's no like financial incentive to push people to do that. That was all built on the open web, and the people who built it didn't make money off of it. If you were working on RSS back in the day, you're not filthy rich now. If you go and you build an open standard for property development, it's not going to make you any money. It'll be great for the world, but you personally are not going to make any money off of it, or unless you do some consulting around it and stuff. But yeah, it doesn't really make a hell of a lot of sense. Um, that being said, it is something that the world definitely needs.
it needs, and it's also like I agree with that, and it's also about features, right? You want to, like, as a person who's creating some sort of chat platform, like we could have email using like a really basic client, but then when
Hmm.
I send you a document, now you've got another application that you have to read the document. You've got all of these little pieces together, and what things like Gmail do really well is kind of like bring it together into kind of something that's a little bit easier to get stuff done. and I'm going to bring up two things. So the first one is like if you've ever looked at like Google Groups and like the forums that people used to use to like, and maybe still use, probably I imagine like the Linux kernel is still developed using these like old school forums where they've got all the email lists. Like for me, I wouldn't be bothered like reading all of that. I would need to have just something to like collate it and make it more understandable. Also, on the topic of Google, I know there was one project that we both were quite interested in, and that was Inbox. Uh,
I loved
Tell
Inbox.
me about Inbox.
Inbox was just like it. It's based on the concept of Inbox Zero, right? Is just having your inbox be completely empty except for the things that you need to do. So, um, I, you would just have the emails that came in during that day, and if you wanted to categorize them, it would categorize. You could set up a bunch of tools to categorize them fairly well. And then when you were done with it, you would press the little check mark and it would archive it. I mean, at least that's what's happening in the back, and it just like moved it out of your actual inbox itself, so your inbox remained clean. If you couldn't deal with it right now, you could press the little clock button, and it would, say when do you want this to reappear in your inbox, and you would say like in a week or in a day or in a couple of hours, and it just kept it completely clean and useful. And when Google came along and waxed Inbox, uh, I have I moved to the Mac Mail client.
I shed a tear that day because I
Yeah,
think like I didn't realize it at the time. So like getting into it, I was like, oh, what is this Inbox thing? It's not really useful. It's just like a gimmick. Then I started using it, and that thing of not having like inbox mail sitting in that folder is something that I've just grown to really enjoy. And it like I don't know if it's maybe that all these unread emails gives me some level of anxiety or some level of stress. But
yeah,
up even from then, like moving back to Gmail, like I still want to have that experience. And Gmail, I mean, I know they probably want to bring up some feature parity. You can do things like delayed things, but you still on the mobile app you can't like archive all like you could with Inbox. And I find that is something that I've even taken over into like what I do at work on Outlook is like I just select all, move it into an archived folder, and then I've got emptiness. And that's kind of just
yeah.
how I want to live, you know?
I completely understand that. I moved over to the Mac Mail client a while back, and it's not as great as Inbox, but it is a first of all, it's like a consolidated app that everything happens inside of, and it's got a lot of really neat shortcuts, so I don't really have to take my hands off the keyboard, and I can like group archive, I can mark all that stuff as read, I can set up a bunch of really nice rules to keep a lot of junk out of my inbox, because the fact of the matter is that we spend a lot of time in email, and you really want it to be like as friction free as possible, especially since I started running a company and an open source project. Is I wake up in the morning and I've got some stuff to chew through, so I also don't want fluff kicking about over there. um, which kind of brings me to RSS again. Is I love RSS because all the newsletters and stuff like that, I'm not going to have that come to my email inbox. That's where I get work done, right?
Mm,
Uh, I have it go to my RSS feed, and if this is one of those sites that doesn't offer an RSS feed, I use Kill the Newsletter, which essentially accepts emails on your behalf and gives you an RSS feed to subscribe to,
amazing.
which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think like and it's kind of like I feel like it's going away from email. Like one of the things that I'm increasingly wanting to do, maybe it's from having things like Telegram and WhatsApp in my personal life and then having email at work. I just want to get onto a chat with someone. It might be a customer, maybe someone I'm working with. And in business land, email is the way to do things. Especially when it comes to moving across the boundary of a company. Like if I want to talk to another company, they might be using Teams, they might be using Google Meet, they might be using Hangouts or Zoom. So, I mean, that's maybe on the video side, but also on the chat side. Like, I find just being able to open up a little chat, ask a few questions. Hey, what are you doing here? How are you doing this? That that flow of information is a lot quicker. I can get access to those details a lot more effectively. Um,
Hmm.
whereas email, I just find is just so slow because you get the common
I
trait, right?
agree.
Someone will send you an email, it takes you like a couple of days to respond, then you've got to wait another few days. By the time you've got to the bottom of it, it's been like a week or two. And I know the other part of the question is that why don't you just give them a call, which I think is what my dad would probably tell me, or what the baby boomers would say. But then these days, I'm finding people don't even like list their phone numbers on their email footers. So
So I actually like I'll fight you on the whole usefulness of email. Is I actually think that email's quite a useful way for communicating, at least in a lot of the things that I do, because it is hard. Well, uh, people have to like think about what it is they're trying to say. Like this is the same rationale that people who didn't like the idea of electronic mail and we're still talking about writing letters, they're like, no, but if you're writing a letter by hand, then they have to sit down and lick the nib of their pen and, really think about what it is they want to write. And then we abstracted that away to email. And yes, you can shoot off a very quick email. And sometimes I get emails from people who I'm like, you could have literally just gone and read the FAQ or something. Why are you emailing me? And I think that that's exacerbated with having access to people on chat. Um, I regularly like see systems admins would like receive a chat message from someone like, hey, XYZ isn't working very well for me. Is there something happening over there? And then they'll just wait for 10 minutes, and then they'll get another chat message like, oh, don't worry about it, I figured it out. And at least email cuts down on that kind of noise. Um, there's also the aspect of notifications and how they can tear you away from good deep work and stuff like that. Is I'm similar to you, as I have uh, zero notifications that make any sort of like noise or buzz, except for phone calls, because if it's an emergency, they will call me. Um, and the only thing that happens to me is I get that little toast icon, the little red notification on the actual chat app, and this works fairly well for me. It means that I'm a fairly late responder when it comes to chats, which may be annoying to romantic partners, um, but it definitely improves my life. With one caveat is I do think that I look at my phone to check if someone has messaged me more often. So I may actually pick up my phone at more times per day. But at least I think it's when I choose to do that. But it is also a conditioned response that I would love to break away from and just
yeah,
go back to having a feature phone.
yeah. And I think one of the like another remarkable thing that email does is it really figures out this like pub sub model of like how do I distribute a message to multiple people. Um,
Hmm.
like when it comes to things like I mean, especially in the COVID world, right? Like where are people congregating and how are they communicating? And I know like things like Discord are becoming quite popular. Obviously, there's the video things like Clubhouse, where it's basically I was on one earlier, and it's basically you're just chatting. There's no visuals whatsoever. You can't even have a chat. You can't even send links, which I find is also quite an interesting way to do things. But it's like when you want to have a group discussion, I guess Zoom's probably the way, or video chat's the way. But also sometimes you're not really wanting to like speak to these people in person. Maybe you want to speak to a large group. There's I guess there's alternatives like
I
forums and
wonder
stuff.
if you could create a chat message client on top of the email protocol. So what you have is you've got your email address called, jasonchat at whatever gmail.com. And then you just have a chat messenger that allows you to send chats backwards and forwards really quickly. So that could, theoretically leverage the power of chat
Mm.
while, using an open protocol.
Yeah, but I think the problem there is that email does require servers. So at that
Yeah.
point, you get the conundrum of, do you just consolidate all of that stuff, that infrastructure, and then you back to Facebook and WhatsApp and Instagram, just trying to combine all of their chat platforms into one, so that that you can have these communications across these boundaries. Um,
S- So where do you think this is going to go in the future? Do you think we're going to consolidate more, or do you think we're going to have more and more disparate applications that don't allow chatting and stuff between them?
I think there will always be uh, many players in the ring. There will be, for convenience, I think you can't ignore network effects. So what Facebook is doing with Messenger, Instagram, WhatsApp, where they're trying to consolidate it, and some would even say it's like an anti-competitive thing, where they, if they were asked to spin off one of their social media platforms, they would maybe not be able to do it if they were so tightly intertwined. Um, the
So
network.
just let me interrupt you over there. So can you explain what you mean by having them tied together? Is this the
So
the ability
so
to chat between them?
yeah. So the word on the street is that they want to combine, obviously, so that you don't have to have Messenger, WhatsApp, and Instagram, because these are all three platforms that are owned by they're all under Facebook, and obviously, like, it's one company. You might, like, is there a way that you can connect them all together? So I think that's going to have massive network effects in terms of uh, getting people on. Um,
Mm,
maybe it. I mean, it might mean that you could potentially message someone on Instagram if you were on WhatsApp. I don't know how that would look, but there's always going to be
yeah.
the open source and the sort of more security orientated, and I think that's going to become more prevalent, especially maybe towards the Apple side. Having this real focus on security and encryption, and I think that's going to become more prevalent, um, based on how people are viewing these companies,
Right.
transacting
Is
the data.
is I do believe that if you're using iMessage to message one another, that's a fairly safe platform. Um, because Apple has shown time and time again that they do take your privacy fairly seriously. The issue with that is even greater than disparate apps, though, is that you actually have to have an Apple device to receive it on. So it's not a, it's not a good solution
Hmm,
unless you're more in the United States, where the majority of people have iPhones over here.
hmm.
Um,
It kind of
yeah,
brings you into the ecosystem, and that's, I mean, that's
yeah,
a perfect place to be, right? Where you've got like something that people want, and it brings people to your product, because obviously it's going to cause people to buy your product. But I think there's always going to be people on the sidelines. There's going to be like one or two. I think we maybe mentioned it before, where there's like a blockchain based chat, or there'll be there's always going to be Signal, which apparently WhatsApp does
mm,
use. So you could always build your own. There's Telegram, obviously. That's got its own. I mean, it had its own controversy with the way that they do the encryption. I don't think it's been.
tell me about that controversy, because I've heard uh, bits and pieces here and there, and as far as I understand, it's because they are not public with how their encryption works. So theoretically, the Russian government could be, you know, piggybacking on it.
I'm no cryptographer, so I don't know the details of it. I remember when Telegram came out, uh, they were basically. I think what it comes down to is that it's, and I'll maybe talking out of my ass right now, so bear with me. Um, their encryption algorithm isn't provably secure, um, but Telegram posted a sort of bounty saying that if you can break it, then you will get this bounty, and no one has broken it. So it's not provably secure like Signal is, where it uses like it's a proven cryptographic
And
mechanism,
it's also open sourced.
and it's open source. Whereas Telegram's, it's not proven uh, mathematically that it's secure, but no one has
Right,
been
right.
able to break it.
So, as far as I understand, WhatsApp uses Signals protocol.
That is correct, but it's what I've never been able to find out is where that boundary is. Like some people say
Right.
that it's only like direct messages and group chats don't get included. I think, as far as I
That
know,
kind of makes sense
Signal
because
uses
I
like
can't.
a ratchet, so it I think it
Mm,
uses some process with where you can only have two parties. So,
right. Yeah, I
but then
think it would
again,
be pretty tough to have a group chat using end-to-end encryption because that's
yes,
kind of
which
not
end
how
you,
that
you
works.
and there's also speculation that is it end to end from me to you or end to end from me to the servers, or
Ooh, yeah, it's a good question.
so
And if WhatsApp is collecting metadata, which they are
yeah,
doing, is obviously, the encryption happens after that kind of information is gathered,
yeah,
which is,
it's the
you're
same
kind
as
of putting
phone
your
tapping,
your
right?
faith in that company. Yeah,
Yeah, because I mean, I think there was like when they were tapping phones and stuff, it was like, oh no, we're not collecting the calls, we're collecting the metadata, where the metadata is like who's messaging who at what times,
yeah,
and maybe the
which is
messages are
very useful information.
yeah.
I
But then
mean, if
again,
I were
like
a,
even
if,
even Apple, they had that one case where there was an attack in the US and they wanted to decrypt it, and they were quite firmly against it. But I think the government did manage to break it actually. Um,
yeah, so the FBI kind of mandated that Apple unlock the phone, and they're like, well, we can't actually unlock it. We would have to essentially um, change the way that the operating system works to do this, and that was a big controversy around that. And I don't think that they did it, but at some point later, it was broken in some other way. But I'm not firm on the details, so
yeah,
don't quote me on it.
yeah. I think it's getting into like dangerous territory because we're like basically talking on pure vapor.
Yeah, no,
I
exactly,
know I
exactly.
am.
People could be listening to this like, oh, yeah, no, no, I've read about this. These guys don't know what they're talking
Yeah.
about.
Um, just bear in mind that we know nothing. We are both idiots. We're just having a chat here.
Yeah,
But
it's actually on my business card. The idiot knows nothing.
idiot knows nothing exactly. But I think that the like I felt it. Like we obviously communicate on Telegram, but I still have quite a few people who are still on WhatsApp, and there was that whole privacy issue, which I think was probably a non-issue. Maybe it was badly seen. I think when I
Hmm.
read it was more about enabling some of these business functionalities, such as like if I want to maybe order a pizza, or if I want to have support with, I know AfriHost is one of these people that does it. Like they have business support or support for your ADSL via WhatsApp. They wanted to enable some more features around that, and that was what the privacy update is about. Not necessarily anything to do with sharing data, but obviously the perception, maybe it was wrong timing. It's had a backlash. People said, "Oh, let's go to Telegram." Some people went all the way to Signal, which is, I mean, Telegram's
Yeah,
alright, but
fine.
Signal's kind of basically like back to SMS. You might have security, but you don't have anyone there. It's like an echo, like it's like a empty, uh, you know, place there. And
Empty
then
room. Yeah.
and then even so, I think some people. I don't know if some people went back. I kind of still have groups that are on WhatsApp, so I think that network
Mm.
effect is really showing its full force.
I'm a bit unhappy with that whole thing as well because everyone was talking about it. It's like 3 months ago now, and everyone started making a lot of people started making a migration off of it, and because I still have a lot of chats that happen on WhatsApp and those people aren't on other platforms, is yes, I'm still on WhatsApp, which kind of defeats the purpose. Um, and it ended up being a worse experience for me because I was doing 100% of my chats on WhatsApp, and now it's fractured between WhatsApp, Telegram, and now more recently iMessage.
Yeah,
And I really liked having that consolidated place, which kind of goes back to the whole, why we need an open protocol for this, so
Yeah,
that I can just have, you know, my one consolidated place. That's one thing that BlackBerry managed to do really well back in the day, is they managed to have a fully consolidated inbox. You would get your BBMs, your SMSs, even your emails in one consolidated inbox that just worked TMCR.
yeah. Unfortunately, as far as I remember from that BlackBerry like era, I guess the only thing that went wrong is that they had one or two really bad days where they just went down, and like it was almost like you get it with cloud
I
providers
remember
going
that,
down,
yeah.
or you get like CDNs getting a bit problematic, and BBM went down for like half a day or something like that, and that was kind of people realizing, hey, wait, I'm actually relying a lot on this, and that was maybe the perfect time for WhatsApp to step in. Having quite a
Mm,
very reliable system. I know they used a lot of like Erlang and a lot of these sort of programming languages that are used within the telecoms industry. There was that story of WhatsApp being a very small team for a very long time. Um,
right.
so I think that reliability aspect. Also, WhatsApp was also adding every different type of phone. They would like make sure they were backwards compatible down to like the smallest brick you could have, and that was kind of enough to push them into that territory of being a global player. But on that
Yeah, and I think that,
on the fragment side, it's almost like the virtual. I was just thinking, it's almost like the virtual equivalent of living in the woods. Like
hmm
you're like, okay, we're gonna have a braai or we're gonna have some party, but should we invite Herman? Oh no, he's all the way on Signal or something. I don't know how to get hold of him, and then you don't end up going
right.
to the party, right? Because it's like you're almost isolated away from everyone else. Um,
Yeah, I missed my 10-year reunion from my high school because the invite was on Facebook and I'm not on Facebook.
that is true. Like it happens for social media too. Like I've also missed a couple of messages from like years ago. People saying like, "Hey, how's it going?" And I'm just like completely missed it. I'm like, no, don't use Facebook
Yeah,
anymore.
it's one of the things that I'm dealing with, especially while traveling, is people will regularly be like, "Hey, what's your Instagram?" So we can like keep in touch.
Yeah,
And it is actually useful for that. Is you go to a city, you like post a picture of the city. People are like, "Oh, I see you're in Frankfurt. You should come and chill out with me." Whereas that's not necessarily an interaction that I can currently have unless I like post about it on my blog and they happen to read my blog. You would hope that they like have an RSS
yeah.
reader and will get that
It's like
information immediately. I,
let me just punch in my RSS reader and you can have a look. But actually,
yeah.
I will tell you what I use recently, and that's Linktree. And it's like a I don't know if you know about this company, but it's a very simple process or a very simple app. All they do is they host under like a URL, which is basically your username. They just host a bunch of links, right? So
Yep.
you could maybe set up your link tree and just say, hey, you can just access me on Linktree, like Herman,
Yeah.
whatever, and then they'd have access to your other avenues. Um, maybe that would be
My
enough.
only avenues currently publicly online are like my blog and my uh
Your
my
GitHub
email
account.
address. Oh, my GitHub account. Yeah.
Where people
I
can
also
yell
I
at
also
you
did a
in the
couple of
issues.
programming courses. Did a couple of programming courses in the day on Udemy. So
Yeah, but I do agree. I think like I would say my experience, like I think I'm on Instagram a lot. I'm on LinkedIn for business reasons. Those are kind of the ones, and I wouldn't say it's super. It's not super social media-y. I don't know what like the. I mean, I kind of enjoyed just flicking through pictures. I remember there was this app called Flickr once, and
mm,
that was just basically pictures, and it's kind of I don't really see it as a communication aspect. I very, if not ever, like write comments on people's pictures. Um, so I don't think it's got like that aspect, but it does have the marketing side, and I think it is quite cool to be able to, link up with people when you're in, uh, in a different country, or if you know. it's kind of cool to see. I mean, I guess it's two sides, right? It's kind of cool to see like where
Yeah.
people end up, um, but also sometimes you just don't want to fucking know. You just want to
So
scrape them
here's
out
an
of your
idea,
life.
Jason. With the whole like personal identifier that, let's take for instance, uses an open protocol that people can use to communicate with each other. Um, you're familiar with the whole mapping concept of what three words that essentially gives you
Oh,
geolocation information based on three words.
don't get me started.
Um, yeah, no, we won't go. We don't go. We won't go down that. But like, the fact of the matter is that three words are enough to identify, millions upon millions of different spaces. Um, wouldn't it have been cool that instead of having phone numbers, we just had like three words? So it's like, hey, call me later, and you're like, oh, sure. What's your contact details? And they're like, goat notebook, uh, shoe, right? And then you can remember that. Whereas if someone tells you their phone number, unless you're mnemonist, is you're gonna have to write that down.
Yeah, I guess like with I know that you sent me a link once, and I maybe breezed over it, but there's a lot of those kind of approaches coming up with what's called Ethereum naming server, so ENS. So you essentially have your private keys, which are like essentially locked down to you. You can buy an ENS domain almost, and that can be in a sense your identifier, so that people can find you with what three words specifically. It sounds nice, and I was very much at one point pro what three words, and maybe I want to be careful what I say. I just think the problem that I found is that two relatively close places are completely different words. So if you say that you're in fasting gamma building or something, that, or toast berry grass, like that's where you are. What is the two blocks that are next to you? Is it toastberry wheat, or you can't, you don't have the sense of, oh, I'm here, I need to get there. um, and then you're obviously pushed to use what three words, which is basically proprietary maps, right?
It is unfortunate that it is proprietary and not an open naming convention.
Exactly. So what I have seen is that there is an open version of it, I think, where they have all the names and the words kind of mapped. But another approach that I've seen from our good friends Google is, I think it's called geocodes or G codes, um,
Hmm.
where it's kind of shorter than your traditional lat long, but your numbering system is still intact. So you could know that if you've got like 4325, 4326 is pretty close by, so you know how to get to places.
Yeah,
That's
that
my
makes sense to me.
that's my
That makes
rant.
sense. I fully agree with you over there. I think that you and I have a lot of overlap in opinion about, like, hey, this is something that could be really good for just the tech world in general. Can we please just make it an open
Yeah,
system
but I mean,
protocol?
I'm not saying it's not going to be beneficial, right? I mean, in the short
Mm.
term, it could be beneficial to, like their play is the EMS, the medical services, and like especially in informal settlements in South Africa, I think it could be very beneficial there.
It
Um,
was used in Ghana quite a bit while I was there. It was even part of one of the food delivery apps that you
yeah,
could put in the what three words of your location.
I think Mongolia is actually accepted as like a proper like system. So I think it's like an official system in Mongolia.
Yeah, that's pretty neat. That's pretty neat. Well, that's an example of you know creating a new standard,
Mm,
and they did make money out of it. So I
yeah,
guess if you created a new standard for property, and you found a way to proprietarize it,
yeah,
then you could theoretically do well if you're creative.
yeah, exactly. But I guess like yeah, we'll have to see what the future brings. And I'm probably hopeful. What do you think is like what do you think is the next step in messaging specifically? Do you think it's going to
Next
go
up,
fully
messaging.
video? Do you think people are going to go back to? I know like voice notes are becoming quite popular. Maybe people will go back to phone calls. Um,
I'd say that voice notes are pretty useful because you're like texting takes a long time. Just mobile keyboards in general are another thing that I'm waiting to see revolutionized in the future because they're so inefficient. I mean, even our current keyboard layout is uh, you know 200 years old. Um, and then we went and we just mapped it onto a phone. So we're typing on a typewriter keyboard on a touchscreen on a little tablet that we carry around with us, which is quite silly. And so voice notes do kind of allow you to improve that communication. But one of the things that I do like about WhatsApp and Telegram, more on Telegram though, is if you tap on the little voice note button, it'll change to a little camera button, and then you hold that down, and it will actually turn on your selfie camera, and you can essentially record a little video note. So you get the facial expressions and the tonation of the voice, etc., etc., along with the voice note, and it just shows it as like little circle video on Telegram, and that is actually my preferred way to especially send longer notes to people
yeah.
because it's got all the other facets that go into human communication.
And my favorite part is that it's asynchronous, so you don't get that interruption, right? So I can listen to it when I want. I think the only maybe downside is like if you're in a large library and you have to answer your messages, and you're probably not going to do a video call because you're probably going to tick off quite a few of the people who are studying in that library. But yeah, I think video is going to be quite big. I'm trying out the thing with voice on Clubhouse, so I'll see how that goes. Obviously, it's got its shortfalls, but we'll have to see what happens. But the thing is, if it goes decentralized and maybe blockchain route, the problem is, how do you make sure people don't use that platform for dodgy things? Like selling
Yep,
people.
yep. No, that's
Uh,
very fair. I mean, the one big issue with having an open platform like email is spam.
yeah,
Right. One quick note before we end off on voice notes, and this was pointed out to me by a friend, and apparently this has always been a thing. So you know how annoying it is when like you're sitting on the bus or something, and someone's listening to their voice notes,
hmm
and it turns out that if you take your phone and instead of listening to it at the speaker, but you put it up to your ear, the uh, the little light sensor over there will make it start playing out of the phone, you
mm,
know, earpiece.
yeah,
So you don't have to listen to that person, and
yeah,
it just looks like you're listening to your phone,
yeah,
which is brilliant. And I'm surprised that it's not publicized more because that's how people should listen to their voice notes.
yeah.
Everyone listening, listen to your voice notes like that. I really don't want to hear them.
Yeah, and I mean even like I know that, and we're going a little bit over time, but I know that there's this phenomenon that you are more uh, bothered by conversations when you can't hear the other side of it. So, like when you're listening to a normal conversation, you hear the one side, you hear the other side. But when you don't hear that other side, your brain kicks in and it's trying to figure out what the other person is saying. And it might be something that's like evolutionary or whatever. But that
Mm.
act of someone on their phone call, and I can imagine it's the same when you're in a co-working space. Although I'm probably the most loud person in the co-working space, so I don't have a leg
Yeah,
to
you
stand
are.
on. So obviously, like it's a bit annoying, but I think have you've always got that chat aspect that you can fall back on.
Mm. Well, on that annoyance of voice notes, despite being a really good way to communicate, let's end the show. It's
Yeah,
been
let's do it.
really awesome chatting to you. And yeah, it's also we're trying out Zencaster,
Yeah,
so
we'll see
see
how
what
that
the
turns
audio
out.
quality is. Yeah.